If you've watched the series Victoria, you probably remember Queen Victoria's bitter and jealous sister, Princess Theodora, a woman portrayed as scheming envious of Victoria's position and determined to sabotage her marriage. But who was she really? Were the sisters truly rivals and enemies, or was this just the invention of the screenwriters? Today, we uncover the truth behind Queen Victoria's forgotten sister. If you haven't gone very deep into Queen Victoria's family history, you might be genuinely surprised to learn that she even had a sister at all. Let me surprise you even more. She also had a brother named Karl, though they were only half-siblings. They all shared the same mother, Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, the very woman I recently talked about in my video on monsters. But their fathers were different. Princess Victoria's first marriage was to a German prince. She was widowed and later married again, this time to the British Prince Edward Augustus, Duke of Kent, one of the sons of King George III. It was from this second marriage that the future Queen Victoria was born. As you can imagine, Princess Theodora's childhood, marked by the death of her father and a forced move to Britain, was far from easy. But Edward Augustus turned out to be a very kind stepfather. He accepted both children as his own, and Theodora later wrote to Victoria many times about how deeply she loved him. Sadly, this small island of stability collapsed as well. Edward died when Victoria was only 8 months old, and for Theodora, this was yet another devastating blow. And this was only the beginning of her personal nightmare. After her second husband's death, Victoria's mother found herself in an extremely difficult position. She didn't speak English, had no real connections at court, and was burdened with enormous debts. Her only hope was that her daughter stood third in line to the throne, and she decided to place all her bets on that fact. She received only a tiny allowance from the British government, and that's when John Conroy entered her life. He was the executive of her husband's will and offered his services as her secretary and controller of their finances. There's even a theory that he may have been her lover as well, so possibly her very personal controller too. In any case, the Duchess became completely dependent on Conroy, and her children became hostages of the infamous Kensington system, a harsh set of rules he designed to control every aspect of their lives. Its goal was simple: to make Princess Victoria weak, dependent, and easy to manipulate in the future. Her sister Theodora suffered under it just as much and shared the same deep hatred for Conroy that Victoria did. Theodora, who was 12 years older than her sister, later described their existence in this system as not a single joyful thought in our gloomy life. The only happy memories the sisters shared were carriage rides with Baroness Louise Leon, Victoria's governess. Those were the rare moments when they could speak freely, think freely, and even dress the way they liked. They had no other childhood circle at all. The only other child allowed near them was Conroy's daughter, whom neither sister particularly liked. In reality, throughout their childhood, they truly had only one another. When Theodora grew into a young woman, there was unsurprisingly considerable interest in her as a potential bride. She received several marriage proposals appropriate to her status. After all, she was the sister of a future Queen of England. However, all of these matches were blocked by Conroy. He saw Theodora's presence as a threat to his influence over Victoria's mother, especially if Theodora were to remain in England. So, a plan was quickly arranged. Theodora would be married off to a German prince and sent far away, ensuring she could play no role at court. Interestingly, in the series, in a moment of anger, Theodora says that she could have become Queen of England because the aging King George IV wanted to marry her. Such rumors did circulate at court at the time, but in reality, this match was never seriously considered. In the end, Theodora married Hans I, Prince of Ho, and Lower Langenburg, a man who was not particularly wealthy, whom she had met only twice before, and who was 13 years older than her.
Yet despite the fact that she was essentially marrying a stranger, she was simply relieved to escape Kensington Palace. She later wrote to her sister that she had escaped some years of imprisonment, which you, my poor dear sister, had to endure after I was married. Often have I praised God that he sent my dear nest, for I might have married I don't know whom merely to get away. Have you ever seen those videos online where the older child finally leaves a toxic family, while the younger one watches sadly as they go? This was exactly that situation. Theodora left for Germany, with her husband, and 10-year-old Victoria lost her only true friend. They continued to write each other long, tender letters, in which Victoria shared everything with her sister, even details about her dolls. The two sisters were reunited 6 years after Theodora's marriage, when the couple returned to Kensington Palace. Upon her departure, Victoria wrote, "I clasped her in my arms and kissed her and cried as if my heart would break. So did she, dearest sister. We then tore ourselves from each other in the deepest grief. I sobbed and cried most violently the whole morning." You'd agree that relationships like these hardly resemble what we were shown on screen, wouldn't you? But perhaps over the years something changed, and Theodora really did become that bitter, jealous sister. In the series, one of the reasons behind Theodora's intrigues and jealousy is the difference in financial status. And yes, Queen Victoria was indeed far wealthier than her sister, the wife of a rather modest German prince living in a single, poorly equipped castle. But Theodora was never forced to walk around her sister's court in torn dresses or sell access to Victoria's balls, as the show suggests. Every time she visited Great Britain, including in 1848 during the political upheavals across Europe, she was granted financial support of £300, which would be roughly $45,000 in today's money. Theodora and her husband did genuinely struggle financially at times, and often turned to Victoria for loans. But it would be hard to find any relative of Queen Victoria who never once asked her for money. The series also shows Theodora trying to drive a wedge between Albert and Victoria, supposedly out of envy for her sister's happy marriage and love match. In reality, there was no such jealousy. Theodora's own marriage turned out to be quite successful, even though, unlike Victoria, she never had the luxury of choosing her husband freely, or even proposing to him herself. Ironically, both sisters were devoted admirers of their husbands.
And Theodora, like Victoria, often found her husband's company far more pleasant than that of her many children. Theodora wrote, "I entirely agree with you that with all one's love for children, it cannot compare with love for one's husband." And now, about the children. In the series, when Theodora arrives at court, she supposedly knows nothing about Victoria's children and is shocked by how many of them there are, which honestly is completely absurd. Victoria and her family were on the front pages of newspapers constantly. She was the monarch of a vast empire. It would have been extremely strange if the number of her children had come as a surprise to anyone, let alone her own sister. Victoria and Albert practically lived like the Kardashians of their time, openly popularizing the idea of a large royal family. But fine, let's forgive the writers this bit of nonsense. Later, Theodora accuses Victoria of not even knowing the names of her children. That, too, is pure screenwriter fiction, created purely for extra drama. In reality, children were one of the sisters' favorite topics in their correspondence. If WhatsApp chats had existed back then, they would have been those sisters endlessly sending each other photos of their little angels. First of all, Theodora, as the older sister, often gave Victoria advice on motherhood. I've already mentioned that Victoria was a rather unconventional mother and had a tendency to emotionally ban her children from time to time. To which Theodora replied, "Children are very difficult to manage. a sentence any mother would agree with, even several centuries later. She urged her sister to be gentler in her parenting methods. I think the best way is to speak kindly to them about it in the moment and not always punish them for every trick. Victoria and Albert even named their youngest daughter Beatrice Mary Victoria Fedora in honor of Theodora. And when Theodora lost her daughter Eliza to tuberculosis, Queen Victoria sent her grieving sister a bracelet with a miniature portrait of the young girl as a gesture of comfort. So, no, the sisters didn't just know each other's children's names. They shared everything: the joys, the pain, and all the complicated realities of motherhood. Of course, their correspondence wasn't always pure sugar and roses. Like any sisters, they sometimes argued, and politics played no small role in that. After all, these were not just two women, but women with titles and influence. For example, during the Franco-Russian War, Victoria and Theodora found themselves on opposite sides of the barricades. Their positions reflected the diverging national interests of Great Britain and Germany. And in their letters, you can clearly see how carefully and precisely they chose their words during that time. A deeply touching turn in their story came in 1860–61, when Theodora's husband, Prince Ernst, died, shortly before Victoria's beloved Alba also passed away. The sisters became widows just months apart. United by shared grief, Victoria desperately wanted Fedora by her side during this dark period. The Queen invited her sister to come live with her in Britain so that they could support one another as widows, hoping to ease each other's loneliness. It was an offer made from the heart. But Theodora ultimately declined, having lived an independent life in Germany for decades. She did not want to give up her autonomy, even for the comfort of her sister's company. "At my age, I cannot give up either my home or my independence," she firmly wrote to Victoria in September 1862. The end of Season 3, the series, Victoria says, "I have no sister," and Theodora turns away, cutting off their relationship and walking out of her life. But the real Queen Victoria had a sister, and Theodora had a sister too. When Theodora died likely of cancer, at the age of 64, Victoria's grief was indescribable. She wrote in her diary, "My own darling, only sister, my dear, excellent, noble Theodore is no more. She was my last near relative on inequality with me, the last link with my childhood and youth." Victoria tried desperately to preserve her sister's memory and created a private collection of Theodora's letters